Hello everyone and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here and today it is time for a brand new video and another installment in the 10 series. Whenever you talk about the history of football, invariably the best teams to have ever graced the sport tend to frequently crop up. Whether it be the magical Magyars of the 1950s, the River Plate side of the same era, Liverpool in the 70s to 80s, Barcelona and Man City under Pep Guardiola, or the Brazil squad at the 1970 World Cup, the options are plentiful under that category. However, what about if you dive into the other end of the spectrum and talk about the worst sides to have ever played football? Of course, there are many issues with this because it's difficult to quantify just what being awful means when one team is put into comparison with another. Is the team quality accounted for? Is it the standard at which the team is playing? Would they beat other awful sides who would feature in this bracket? It's quite difficult to put all these things into consideration. I mean, even though some of them were awful in the Premier League, I still think they beat a team from the 10th tier of English football with consummate ease. So it's quite difficult to judge exactly what awful means. However, what I'm going to try and do today is present to you my list of the worst sides to ever grace the game, or some of the worst sides to have ever graced the game, in accordance with the level they were playing at the time. As mentioned, Sunderland would beat a team from Vanuatu very easily, but as they were awful at their standard at the time, which would be the Premier League, they could be taken into consideration. However, they will not feature in this video, although they may feature in a part 2, which may come out at some point in the near future if the demand is there, because of course there are plenty of teams whom I will miss out on including. For now though, here is my list of 10 of the worst football teams of all time. Number 1. American Samoa. Admittedly, if you're judging on the here and now, American Samoa are, according to FIFA, the 190th best team in the world out of 210, with Anguilla taking the spoon as the worst team on the international front, according to FIFA's world rankings. However, I can't overlook the absolute atrocities of American Samoan football between 2000 and 2010. The 2002 World Cup was the first that they attempted to qualify for, but they might as well have not even bothered. They conceded an unbelievable 57 goals in 4 games, losing 13-0 to Fiji and 31-0 to Australia, which remains the worst international defeat in the entire history of international football in games registered by FIFA. Now, admittedly, their average age in that game was 18 as a result of passport issues and exams taken by some of their more experienced players, so you maybe might have expected it. So to speak, it was men against boys. Their next 2 attempts saw them register minus 33 and minus 37 goal differences respectively, only scoring twice across all of those 3 qualification attempts. Their best results were 2 4-0 defeats, one to Samoa and one to Tonga. They have admittedly improved, and they nearly reached the next stage of the Oceania qualification process for the 2018 World Cup, only missing out on that on goal difference. Although in the Pacific Games, barring 1983, their 4 other attempts have resulted in 4 goals and 142 goals conceded
in 18 games,
including 36 in their last attempt back in 2019. To put a final stamp on things, they even have a negative goal difference against every team they have played, including Wallace and Futana, which sounds like a 1930s comedy stand-up duo. Number 2. Micronesia. A team that did actually enter the 2015 Pacific Games, unlike American Samoa, was Micronesia. Whilst American Samoa conceded a grand total of 42 goals across 1 tournament in 1987, which is their worst showing to date, Micronesia managed to top, or lower, that in just 1 game. One of the few nations in the world without an official football team, the tiny collection of islands that make up Micronesia only have a grand total of 2 full-size football pitches, meaning that a national team, or a national league, is nigh on impossible. Their last full international was in 2003, and they are yet to receive FIFA or OFC affiliation. However, they decided to put forward an under-23 squad for the 2015 Pacific Games, and needless to say,
it went badly.
It started off with a 30-0 trouncing by Tahiti, but that was, as it turned out, their best showing in the entirety of the tournament. Fiji were up next, and 38-0 was the final result, before they ended their catastrophic tournament with their worst display of it against Vanuatu, succumbing to a 46-0 defeat, with Jean Kartak scoring 16 goals on his own in that game. In the end, they ended up with a minus 114 goal difference across 3 games, and their out-of-depth status was fully affirmed when the coach confirmed that many hadn't gone out of their separate islands before, and their game against Tahiti was the first time that most of them had actually played on a full-size football pitch.
Truly abysmal.
Number 3. Derby County 2007 to 2008. The most obvious and well-known inclusion in this entire list, Derby County sets a Premier League points total that even Sunderland can't eclipse, or declipse if that's even a word. In 2007, Derby, after several years away from the Premier League, won promotion through the playoffs after a 1-0 win over West Brom. But unfortunately, it quickly dawned on them that they simply were not prepared for the trials and tribulations that they were about to face. By the end of the season, they had accrued a multitude of unwanted Premier League records, including lowest points tally of 11, fewest goals scored with 20, most goals conceded with 89, worst goal difference with -69, ooh, cheeky, fewest wins in a season with just 1, and of course it was against Newcastle, the only team that they remained unbeaten against. No away wins, and a 32-match winless run in the league, which was extended to 36 the next season. To make matters worse, Robbie Savage was signed and instantaneously appointed captain in January 2008 with disastrous results, and midway through the season, a sex tape of the manager, Paul Jewell, was leaked online. You really couldn't make any of this up. Number 4, Darwin FC, 1898 to 99. Even that, somehow, didn't compare to Darwin's plight some 109 years earlier, or another team who I will profile in part 2. If of course the demand was there. In 1898-99, the Salmoners were in trouble as one of their former players had sued the club for reasons I unfortunately couldn't find. And as a result of this, they were in financial strife, and it showed on the pitch. Although their home form wasn't particularly calamitous, admittedly only winning twice and losing 11 times, but only conceding 32 goals, only one more than 15th place Luton Town, their away form really did them dirty. They lost all of their games barring one, and conceded a record 109 goals on the road, including 3 10-0 annihilations, one of them being to Man City. To add insult to injury, they lost an English League record of 18 games in a row, which even Derby couldn't surpass during that disastrous 2007-2008 season. Surprisingly, when put up for re-election, they were rejected and now find themselves, after a reincarnation, in the 10th tier of English football. Number 5. CSM Pisani. A recent inclusion in this list in accordance with the time at which this occurred, CSM Pisani came to my attention through an article I read about them being labelled as one of the luckiest teams to come out of this coronavirus pandemic. In the last few seasons, they've most certainly have ridden their luck in the Romanian 3rd division. It started in 2016-17 as they won the relegation playoff to maintain their place in the division. In the next 2 seasons though, they finished in the relegation zone both times, but were spared falling into the 4th tier on both occasions by virtue of teams going under in both of those seasons. And as they maintained financial security in both, they were able to keep their place in the division. In 2019-20, however, they finally looked like that they would drop out of the division into which their quality surely merits, as they started the season by losing each of their first 16 games, scoring 11 goals and conceding 83. However, as a result of the pandemic raging across the world, Romanian football decided to null and void the 3rd tier's results for that season, meaning that whilst promotion still did occur, relegation did not, meaning that Pisani lived to fight another day, or they'll sink even further than before. Number 6. Tasmania 1900 Berlin. In 1964-65, Hertha Berlin were relegated from the Bundesliga after allegations of them making illegal payments to their players were confirmed. And the league decided, in times of great political strife bear in mind, to promote a team from Berlin in order to have a Berlin representative in the Bundesliga. However, the 2 main candidates, Tennis Borussia Berlin and Spandauer SV, both rejected the chance to join the big time, and Tasmania 1900s, 3rd place in the Regionalliga, were offered the gig 2 weeks before the season started. It didn't end well. They played their home games at Berlin's Olympic Stadium, and around 81,000 baying supporters turned out for their first game. 28 defeats, no away wins, 15 home games without victory, 8 points, 108 goals conceded, and a record 9-0 home defeat by Maidreicher SV later. Their final attendance for their final game was 827, another record low for the Bundesliga. They sank back into regional football, and within 7 years, the club had gone bust. Number 7. East Stirlingshire. Moving up north, we head to Scotland and East Stirlingshire. The Shire are known for 2 things. Those being that they were the club where Sir Alex Ferguson started off his to-be unparalleled managerial career, and for finishing bottom of the Scottish Football League for 5 straight seasons between 2003 and 2007. 2003-04 was unarguably their worst season to date, as they only won twice, collected just 8 points, conceded 118 goals, and finished a whopping 17 points behind second to last placed Elgin City. The main factor as to why they were in that position so frequently was because A, they were in severe financial strife, with their manager during that time, in 2002-2003, becoming the first unpaid manager in professional Scottish football history, and B, because there was no relegation to the Highland or Lowland leagues at the time. However, as a result of their negative exploits, shall we say, the Scottish FA ruled that if a team finished bottom twice in a row, they would be up for losing associate member status in the professional game. Stirlingshire survived that vote on the grounds that they didn't finish bottom in 2007-2008, but miraculously they beat Montrose 3-1 in the final game of the season to hoist themselves off the foot of the table and into the penultimate last place. They did end up in that same position again in 2014, but owing to a league restructuring, they were spared from that vote, but ended up being relegated in 2016 to the regional leagues after relegation to those leagues was introduced, after losing to Edinburgh City in a playoff. They haven't been promoted since. Number 8. Ziya at the 1974 World Cup. The Ziya team going into the 1974 World Cup was made worse by the political situation which was engulfing the country. President Mobutu had been unanimously confirmed as president for life 4 years earlier, probably some form of manipulation was occurring, and set about nationalising every single institution in the country, including sports teams, and banning Western or colonial influences. Unfortunately, this descended into tyranny and kleptocracy, with most of the funds made from the country ending up in Mobutu's hands. And this newfound poverty transcended over to the national team, who qualified for the 1974 World Cup. They only lost 2-0 to Scotland in the first game in what has been described as a decent showing, but before their second game against Yugoslavia, they had learned that their funding for that game, as well as their final group game, was non-existent, meaning that essentially they were slaves on the pitch. They ended up threatening to boycott the game against Yugoslavia, but after FIFA intervened, they played, suffering a record 9-0 defeat, which is still a joint record at the World Cup to date. Mobutu, predictably, was outraged by the second result, and stated that if they lost by 4 or more goals to Brazil in their final game, they wouldn't be allowed back into the country. An iconic image is a Ziya player belting the ball away from a Brazil free kick which was yet to be taken. And whilst it was shrugged off at the time as an incident of so-called African ignorance, which is a questionable comment in itself, it was because in fact the Ziya players felt threatened, and the player in question wants to be sent off in protest over their wages. They only lost 3-0 in the end and managed to make it home, but they ended up being impoverished anyway, with one of their players reportedly being beaten up by cash thieves, demanding the money that they, as it turned out, didn't receive. The saddest story in this list, undoubtedly. Number 9. Longford FC. Not to be confused with Longford Town FC who play in Ireland, Longford FC of Gloucester didn't really have the best of preparations in leading up to the 2015-16 season, as they lost their entire squad and manager.
Yes, really.
And it showed on the pitch, needing to play their reserve side to start off the season. Being the 13th tier, this wasn't a good omen. As such, by the halfway mark, they hadn't even gained a point, conceding shiploads of goals on a regular basis. They needed some inspiration, so they turned to the man they call Psycho. Stuart Pearce, despite being 53 years old, signed a 1-game contract with the Gloucestershire outfit, making his only appearance in a 1-0 defeat, which turned out to be their best result of the season. By the end, they had conceded 226 goals and scored just 10, making their goal difference minus 216, and they lost every single one of those games, as you might have figured out from a prior comment. Despite thinking that they could turn their fortunes around, it didn't happen. They now find themselves in the Stroud and District Football League Division 3, the 16th tier of English football. What a fall from grace. Number 10. Ibiza Sport Club. Even though this list is in no particular order, I can't help but feel as though I've saved the best until last. Ibiza Sport Club actually pride themselves on being cataclysmically bad, actually dubbing themselves as the worst team in the world, and with good reason. Between 1978 and 1984, they won just 1 game, drawing 6 and losing a staggering 48. Based in Pernambuco, the team couldn't lift themselves off the bottom of the 2nd tier of the regional leagues, staying there for that length of time, as you might have expected. But their absolutely atrocious status has given them a worldwide following, even having the audacity to approach Jose Mourinho in 2015 after he was sacked by Chelsea to make him their new manager. It gets even better than this though. In 2018, the club actually started winning games at a consistent rate, shock horror, and their owner targeted reaching the top tier of the regional leagues as soon as possible. Their midfielder, the wonderfully named Mario Shampoo, stated that, quote, "If we keep on winning, we're going to lose our brand." Close quote. The epitome of the Goon Show quote of,
Win? No, we mustn't. We don't want to spoil our record.
They haven't quite reached it yet, but who knows where they'll end up in the next few years. So that pretty much concludes today's video. If you have any more suggestions of terrible teams that I could cover in part 2, stick them down in the comments below. Of course, also let me know what you think of this list of interesting teams, shall we say, in the comments below. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and until next time, I'll see you then.